Today I'd like to talk about a site that's been in the news a lot recently. It's probably one of the most important archaeological discoveries of the 21st century. It's called Karahan Tepe, and it's in southeast Turkey, not far from Göbekli Tepe. Now, this site was excavated in, I think, 2019, 2020, and amazing things were found. Not only were T-shaped pillars found, like those at Göbekli Tepe, but also these kind of pits which were dug into the bedrock. So I'd like to have a look at this, and what I'm going to talk about today specifically, a lot has already been said about this site, but specifically I'd like to talk about the astro-geometrical side of it. So is the winter solstice linked to some kind of geometrical organization? That's what we're going to try and find out. So this is a picture by Hugh Newman, the picture here of the head which is coming out of a wall. This has been carved directly into the bedrock, this sculpted head. And I think it was in 2021, Hugh Newman and J.J. Ainsworth went there to watch the sunrise at winter solstice, just after the excavations, the first excavations had been done. And they saw this incredible phenomenon of the sun's first rays shining in through a little window which had been dug into the rock and lighting up this head on the side here. This was an incredible moment for Hugh and JJ, and Hugh, of course, has written a paper about this, and I think he's actually published a book about the subject. It's a life-changing experience to make a discovery of this kind. So that's very important. Now the question is this the oldest marker of winter solstice? Because Karahan Tepe has been dated to about 9,000 BC, a very long time ago, 11,000 years ago. And it may be, or for the time being, the oldest marker of winter solstice. So let's just situate Göbekli Tepe. In the previous slide here, we see it's in southeast Turkey. Here's the whole of Turkey here. And here's Göbekli Tepe, not far north of Syria. And around Göbekli Tepe now are a whole load of new sites that are discovered, which are called the Tepler sites. And you can see a list of them here for the time being. Maybe more will be discovered. And these sites have in common the fact that one can find these T-shaped pillars, these stone pillars which have been carved out of solid rock and have a T shape to them. And they're to be found on these different sites. And then there are quite a lot of sculptures, statues and sculptures of birds and different animals. So it's very important. And of course, the age of the thing is what really makes it important. So in a previous talk, I talked about Göbekli Tepe. Well, in the film Megalith's Forgotten World, I talked about the geometry inside the Göbekli Tepe site, where are the three enclosures which form an equilateral triangle from their central points. But this equilateral triangle has been done with what's called modular geometry. And then in a second talk, I showed how this same modular geometry had been projected over a vast scale between three sites, between Göbekli Tepe and then Tasli Tepe to the north here, and Habet-Suvan Tepezi to the south. These two sites run along a kind of mountain ridge here, a high ridge, and they are both visible from Göbekli Tepe, which makes this a very interesting fact. And this gave incredible geometry with very precise measurements, exactly the same distance between Göbekli Tepe and Tasli Tepe and Habet-Suvan Tepesi, and the whole thing done with modular geometry. So that I went into that in detail in a talk and showed how it was similar to the equilateral triangle that had been done inside the Göbekli Tepe site. But today the subject is Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe. This is the relationship between Karahan and Göbekli. And again, this is another perfect geometry linked to modular geometry. First of all, I'd like to say that there is no actual visibility between Karahan Tepe and Göbekli Tepe. There's a slight hill point here. Very slight, but nonetheless enough to stop direct visibility from one point to another. It'd be interesting to see if there's anything in particular on these high points. So we can see right across the valley, this is the valley from Göbekli Tepe, which is on a high point, and then it comes up here. But just at this, around here, there's a little part which is slightly higher than Karahan Tepe. Okay. On the contrary, Habet-Suvan Tepesi, which I showed in the previous talk, has perfect visibility across from Göbekli Tepe right to Habet-Suvan Tepesi. And I'll be coming back to the link between Habet-Suvan Tepesi and Karahan Tepe in another talk. But quite obviously, there's been some kind of organization here between these different sites. So Habet-Suvan Tepesi, which is called a satellite site of Karahan Tepe, and the excavations have revealed that it's perhaps even older than Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe, because it's on a very high point, with this visibility, as I said, 35 kilometers away to Göbekli Tepe. And from Habet-Suvan Tepesi, there is visibility to Karahan Tepe on the hilltop here. So this is a photo which shows this visibility. I'd just like to go into Google Earth and show you here in Google Earth. Up on the left here, we have Göbekli Tepe, and down here, Karahan Tepe, and Habet-Suvan Tepesi down here. Okay. Now, this is extremely precise geometry that I've put in here. You can see this is Göbekli Tepe, and here's the corner of this yellow grid that I've placed here with the lines, okay, going from Göbekli Tepe. And this yellow grid has 7 squares by 4 squares, okay, 7 by 4. Now we see that Karahan Tepe on this grid is exactly here in the corner, right? This is the site, this is the archaeological site of Karahan Tepe here, and it is perfectly in the corner of 3 squares north-south by 7 squares east-west. So it's a 3 by 7 geometry, and in my past talks I've gone into a lot about the importance of the numbers 3 and 7. So here we can see them linked in the geometry. But then if we add an extra square of the same size down the bottom here, we can see that Habet-Suvan Tepesi actually is on the bottom of the line. Now, it's not in the corner of a square because the angle between Habet-Suvan Tepesi and Karahan Tepe is not 45 degrees. It's a different angle, and I'll be coming back to that in the next talk. But the distance that separates them on a north-south line is the same as the grid. It's 1/3 of the distance of north-south between Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe. So you can see that there's a similar, well, a coherent geometrical thing going on here, which is very, very important to look into. Okay. Now, to come back to the talk here, here are some pictures. This one's by Hugh Newman. A lot of these photos were taken by Hugh Newman when he was there at the winter solstice. And this had before, what you see here, had before been all under the hill. So this was all covered in earth. None of this had been visible before the excavations. And Hugh Newman and Andrew Collins and other people probably had been to Karahan Tepe before that and had seen just little stones sticking up out of the ground. And then these excavations showed the whole height of these stones, which came up like that out of the ground. Here's another picture. You can see this circle, this circular organization, and all these walls here that were built. So this is obviously a very sophisticated organization. And these pillars, T-shaped pillars, go on a lot further. The excavations are not yet finished. So this is very important. Now, when they excavated, they found some incredible things. First of all, in the middle here, you can see this little sculpture of a vulture. Beautiful little sculpture of the bird coming out here out of the structure. And you can see that this has been built around it. These aren't just stones that have fallen onto this vulture. This was all protected and filled in very carefully to preserve it. Above the vulture is a circular stone with a hole in it. A part of this is broken. You can see this. And these two pillars. But then, of course, the major thing on the right of the two pillars is this statue, about 6'8" tall, maybe over 7 feet tall, perhaps. So it's larger than life, larger size than a human being. But an incredible statue. We can see how the rib cage has been shown here, with 12 ribs on either side, showing the 24 ribs in the rib cage. And between the ribs, there's a little rectangle here, which is rather mysterious. And then we have the two hands, the two arms coming down, and they're surrounding the man's sex here. And we can see he's not actually holding it. Sometimes it said he's holding his sex. He's not actually holding it here. His hands are just around it. But he's been circumcised. So if this is 11,000 years ago, this must have been done with flint. Okay, there were no metal tools of any kind at this time. According to the official historical time scale thing about the discoveries that have been made. Okay, now we'll have a little closer look. This is a side view of it. You can see his hands, quite clearly the rib cage and the circumcised penis here. And part of the front of the head is missing and the nose. But if we look around the jaws, the jawbone, we can see that it comes down. The jawbone comes down on a kind of slope like that to link to the shoulders here in a special kind of way. Now, I've compared this to this statue from Egypt. This is the statue of Cheops, I think. It's from the ancient empire of Egypt, and it might be Khephren. I think maybe it's his son Khephren. And we can see with the headgear here and how this comes round at the side. But above all, look at this beard, this very sort of thin pointed beard coming down from the chin. We have exactly the same thing here, the little rounded beard coming from the chin on the sculpture at Karahan Tepe. Now that's very important, and we can see how the neck is behind that. It goes in exactly in the same way We have the same thing going. And then we have the V-shaped here of the neck bones, which is a similar shape which is to be found on another sculpture, which was found in Sanliurfa, and is dated to the same period. And of course we have the eyes and the nose, the triangular nose coming down, but the whole mouth area and the chin has been destroyed. Okay, this sitting position, we have the statue here in a sitting position, as the same kind of idea. It's not exactly the same, of course, but there's something similar about these two statues. Okay. Now, another important discovery is what's called the pillar shrine. So we can see it here. This is sculpted in the bedrock. And there are 10 pillars here. But what is astounding is that 9 of these pillars have been carved out of the bedrock. So the builders, if you want to call them that, dug into the bedrock and left these pillars. So this is a monolithic structure. It's all one stone, except for this stone here, which is a monolith which has been placed there. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of these pillars which come out of the bedrock and have been left, they're from this position, and this 10th pillar which has been placed in there. And here we can see the head that gets the rays at sunrise, at winter solstice. I'll come back to that. I'd just like to have a look at a few details here on this pillar shrine. It's called shrine, for want of a better word. And I've encircled, first of all, a sort of gully here on the bottom side, and then a sort of slit here on this side. Now, we're going to go over now to Sketchfab. Now, this is a 3D model of Karahan Tepe, which is to be found on the site Sketchfab. An incredible model of the monument in 3D, and here we can move around it like this. Okay, so here we can see, here is the pillar shrine. You can pull this into the middle and zoom into the pillar shrine. So this is the stone that has been placed there. Okay, and we can see the little wedging stones at the base, which have placed this stone here. And then the other stones have been sculpted straight into the bedrock. Okay, so this is quite an astounding fact. Now, we can see quite clearly a gully running down into this. If I zoom out a little bit, now there's a path, boardway that's been built here, but one can quite clearly see that this is draining water down here and draining water into the pit. Behind it, there is another pit slightly higher than this. There's another pit here. And again here, there's a massive pit which has been dug into the bedrock. And on the end of this pit, there is a kind of stone structure, which if we look behind, you can see sort of changes the angle. And you can see on the left here, this gully, which is probably bringing water into this pit. Okay, so they seem to have been draining water to put in here. Now, if we look at the pillar shrine here, and we look at the far side of it, we can see here that, let's see if I can get this correct. Look, there is on the other side, there is kind of slit here, So this is all sculpted out the rock. There's a slit here. And if we look at that, we can see that it goes round the back. There's a stone, which is blocking this, and then it's blocked off round here. So if now we turn around and look in the other side and move in like this now, we can see that there's a kind of hole behind this stone here. It's a little bit tricky, but there's a hole here which seems to let the water run down into this pit here. So this looks like it's a kind of overflow system for the pillar shrine. So the water comes in here, fills it up, and then this is a kind of overflow system which would seem to drain out the water, and when it gets to a certain height, it overflows and goes down into this pit here. Okay, so there seems to have been a water organization going on here, which is very important. We're in an area which is quite dry, of course, and so water must have been very important, but it would seem here to be much more orientated towards ritual purposes, with this head here, which is, the head will be above water. You can see here, it seems quite clear that there's a kind of line here which could be the water level. Okay. So how long was this in use for? What was it used for? Now, while we're here, let's look at this. Now, on the 3D model, this little window hasn't been opened correctly, but this is in fact open. You can see in the photographs that that goes through there. That is an opening which goes through, and it's through this opening that the sunlight comes in and lights up the head here. Okay. So we'll come back to the presentation. So there we can see this pit, the entrance and the pit behind it. This is the movable stone here that I showed you. And I was just wondering, this may be a strange conjecture, but I was just wondering, because all the other stones are fixed, because they're part of the bedrock, could it be possible that this stone here was moved around? Could it be possible that it was movable and that it could be placed in certain positions? It would seem to have the size of the distances between the stones. Could it have been placed to organize in some way some kind of flowing of the water? That's conjecture. Very difficult to prove that, but it was just a question I was wondering about. Okay. Now, here's the pillar again, and here's the head. So we're going to look more into that now. These again, Hugh Newman's photographs where he discovered this, Hugh Newman and J.J. Ainsworth, who discovered this lighting up the head here, and the light coming in through this opening, through this doorway, which is bedrock. This is all bedrock. These are not placed stones. This has all been sculpted right out of the bedrock, okay? So there's definite incredible intention going on here. This is another head that was found somewhere else in the Karahan Tepe excavations. You can see these sort of modular teeth, square teeth here, and this very elaborate forehead, compared with the head inside the pillar shrine, which has got a slightly different appearance to it. Now, I'd like to compare this head with one that's in Tiwanaku in Bolivia. So here we're 3,820 meters above sea level in the site in Bolivia, an incredible place in a really out-of-the-way spot near Lake Titicaca. And there's a place called the semi-sunken temple here, which we can see. These central pillars were placed there, but the ones in the wall were in their initial position. And coming out of the wall of this temple, there were all these heads sticking out of the wall in the same way as the pillar shrine in Göbekli Tepe. So you can see, this is a closer up version, you can see the heads here and the standing stones that were part of the wall of this. Now, I'd just like to, here we can see them from the side, and you can see they have these kind of hats on, right? They've got these special, they have headgear, which is quite clear. And this is similar to the stone in Karahan Tepe, which has clearly a sort of flat cap, a flat sort of headgear on. But if you compare these two images, they're very similar. This Tiwanaku head has a very straight eyebrow line here, going right at right angles to the nose. The same kind of very marked eyebrow shape here with sunken eyes behind it and the nose coming down in front of it like this. And then if we look at the mouth here, you can see that the lips are very pronounced and similar, very similar. Underneath the nose, there is a clear sort of, between the lower cheeks, there is a clear dip on both of these heads. So they're very similar heads, but they're also coming out of walls. Both of them are sticking out of walls like that. So the similarity here is incredible. And of course, Tiwanaku is dated to 300 of current era, whereas Karahan Tepe 9,000 before current era. So there's a time gap between these which is enormous, and geographical distance between them enormous, totally different continents. But the similarities are quite astounding. So that's something I thought it was worth pointing out. So here's the image of the sun's rays, the sun rising here, slightly on a hilltop. There's a slight rise towards where the sunrise is, and it would come down through the main enclosure, through this window, to light up the side of the head here. Okay. Now, there's a few photographs taken on a timeline, I think by J.J. Ainsworth. These photos were taken over about a half an hour period, a 40-minute period, I think. So these were taken on the 20th of December, 2021. You may already have seen them. When the sun rose at 7:37 a.m. This is all Hugh Newman's information. And the azimuth was 119.83 degrees. It lit the side of the head, and then as the sun slowly rose, as it rises, then the sunbeam goes down a little as the sun slowly rises and goes down towards the base of the face. It started to shine through the porthole at an angle of 121.47 degrees at 7:47. Now, if we go back to 9,000 BC, the sun's angle would have been slightly different because of the change in the Earth's tilt, what's called the obliquity. So the sun was, the Earth was slightly more tilted in 9,000 BC. It was at its maximum position of about 24.3 degrees tilt. We're at 23.44 degrees now, so it's almost 1 degree less tilt than at the time of Karahan Tepe. And this, of course, has an effect on the solstice angle. It would mean that the sun at winter solstice would be rising a little further south. And so I've done the calculations that the sun rose at an azimuth of 121.72 degrees with the height of 1.05 degrees linked to the topography of the place. Okay, so at the base here you can see Karahan Tepe site is here on the left, and you can see how the sun's rays would have come up over the hill here. And this is an angle of 1.05 degrees. It's slightly exaggerated in the picture so we can see it more clearly. Okay, so when the sun started rising, it began to illuminate the stone head, which is looking east. So the head is actually looking east. So the winter solstice ray is lighting up its right-hand cheek, okay? Because the sun is further south. This is very interesting. And so it's coming through the window, which has been opened up for that. And this continues, as in 2021, for about 45 minutes. And these calculations take into account a temperature of about 15 degrees, which enables to calculate refraction. Here we have the table of the site by Victor Rice, which is an incredible tool for anybody studying this subject. And we can see here the information that we've put in. So the date is 9000 BC minus 9000, the latitude 37.048, which is the latitude of the place. The altitude, given apparent altitude of 1.05 degrees. The solstice, so we can see this is we've chosen the solstice. And then the sun here just fully above the horizon. So I've chosen the position where the sun is just sitting on the horizon. And that's the moment that the light will come in through the window and light up the head. Okay, so when the sun is below the horizon and just coming up over the horizon, the light is not yet coming in through the window. And once the sun is sitting on the horizon, then the light comes in through the window. So with those different details, we get the angle here of 121.72 degrees, which is very similar to the angle that Hugh Newman got when he was working on his observation when the sun first came in through the window in 2021. The difference is that in 9000 BC, the sun would have been lower when Hugh Newman saw it. When the light started coming in through the window, the sun would have been at a certain height above the horizon, whereas at the time of Karahan Tepe, the sun would have just been on the horizon, sitting on the horizon. So the beam would have come in at a lower angle, and so it would have lit up more of the face, because we can see that it lights up the lower part of the face on Hugh Newman's photographs, whereas if the sun had been lower, then it would have lit up the whole of the head, okay, on the right-hand side. So if we look at this angle, 121.72 degrees, if we subtract 90 degrees from that, because 121.72 is from north, so if we take away 90 degrees, we get the angle from east. So the angle from east is 31.72 degrees. Now, this is an angle which is very familiar to me from the work I've been doing on many of these ancient sites around the world. Here we can see the photograph of it, the image of it with the sun. The sun should really be sitting on the horizon. The sun's a little low on my photo here, on my image. But we can see the ray coming in through the window and lighting up the side of the head. and the face is looking east, and we have an angle of 31.72 degrees. This is the same thing seen from above. The north is at the top. We have the east on the right-hand side and the sun ray coming in through the window here to light up this side of the head. Now, this angle of 31.72 degrees, I said it's an angle I know very well. It's because it's the angle of what's called a golden rectangle. So if we draw the right angle north-south, we would have 1 unit, and east-west 1.618 units. So this golden rectangle, which is a very harmonious geometrical shape, was exactly the angle of the sunrise at the time, at winter solstice, at the time when Karahan Tepe was constructed. So this is incredible confirmation of what I've called astro-geometry, the choice, the fact that places were chosen according to specific geometry marked out by the sun. And it's linked to the latitude and the time. So it's at this specific spot at that time that you would get this phenomenon. And it's marked perfectly clearly here with the head looking east and the sun ray coming in through the window. So that's a very beautiful representation, an incredible way of leaving. And then the whole thing was covered over, filled in, covered over, and has carried through millennia like that and come down to us today, which is an incredible privilege for us to discover this. I'd like to point out that this same kind of geometry is used in the Karnak alignments in France, the Karnak megalithic stone alignments in France, in the part of the alignments called the East Menek. I won't go into all of the details. I've done this in different talks and in books, but we can see here the diagram of the stones and how these stones create circles, which are in a ratio of the golden ratio, but they're orientated in such a way, if we take the axis linking this whole geometry together, it's oriented in such a way to create a relationship in cardinal directions with the golden rectangle, the same golden rectangle that we've just discovered at Karahan Tepe. To finish this part of the talk, I'd just like to look at how the moving stone, or the movable stone, the T-shaped pillar, which is in the pillar shrine here, in its actual position, let's suppose it never moved, I wanted to see how it was positioned with respect to the window, because it's actually perpendicular. It's right opposite the window. So it would definitely look like the stone is positioned with respect to this opening. And so I was able to measure the angle between the solstice line and this line here at 35.5 degrees, which gives us an angle from north of 157.22 degrees. And I looked at what was going on in the sky in 9000 BC at that time. Here we can see this is stellarium from 9000 BC at the latitude, of course, of Karahan Tepe. And what we see here we have south and southeast. This is the horizon along here. So that's the horizon line. And you'll see there's some stars coming up on that angle. Okay, there's a whole constellation here. This is the constellation of Orion, the different planets. The names are in French here. On this is the French version of stellarium. But the stars are the same. And we can see how at the time of Karahan Tepe, at this particular angle, the constellation of Orion was rising through that window as seen from the pillar shrine, from the center of the pillar shrine. Okay, so I'll finish this part of the talk here. So the winter solstice, in conclusion, the winter solstice at Karahan Tepe marks the angle of a golden rectangle using the topography to slightly delay sunrise. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed this video.